Behind the Shades.
There are people who live with mental health diagnoses that change is not okay for them. Change is difficult. I have some people who live with social anxiety, people who live with just regular and generalized anxiety, and the mask wearing kind of gave them a mask. I think we talked about this the last time. It's like a mask, right? So they don't feel as nervous or anxious because people can't see that thing, because their opinion is people can see through them and they can see what they're experiencing, all the shame and embarrassment, all of that they live with um, regularly. But when they have that mask on, people can't see it. At least that's their perception, so they feel more comfortable. And so when the restrictions to lift and mask wearing was no longer a requirement, yes, they can continue to wear it because it's personal choice, but now they feel shame because nobody else is wearing it. And they're wearing it, and now they feel like they're an outcast again. So there's a lot of that with those weird pieces to it that keep coming up. But the studies have shown, especially between for the ages of 15 to 34 in our country, that suicide rates have increased. That I'm talking about here in the States, um, but I'm sure it's like that in other communities across the world, where this has become an overwhelming experience for so many different people for many different reasons. Your introverts, um, many times those people who are introverted and they're staying home, not doing anything, they're doing it because it's a choice, but also because it gives them the feeling that they're in control of their lives, right? So you take that away, right? There, it's no longer a choice anymore. Now they feel, oh, well, everybody's doing it. I don't feel special anymore. I, you know, that ability to have some level of control has feels it. They feel like it's gone out the window, because people, especially people who have experienced trauma, one of the reasons why they have been able to cope for so long is because they found ways to make have them feel as though they are now in control, because when they're victimized in the past, they did not have control of what was going on, especially those people who had long-term victimization. But and those are these are different topics that could probably take us hours to talk about, because there are different pieces to it that could take a long time to explain. But overall, across the country, the studies have shown, and there's more studies coming out now that we've been through this for a little bit more than 2 years. A lot of the psychologists and the scientists are actually conducting studies with people, and they're determining that this is probably the worst um, experience, and it has the worst effect on substance use issues. So the drug use has increased in some cases. Some the opioid overdose rate has increased in some areas of the country. The anxiety and depression has increased. People who lived with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or complex PTSD, their symptoms have gotten worse, because the things that they used to use to cope and manage their disease prior to this, they no longer have access to, whether it's family, friends, or just a feeling of control or access. And so, it's multifaceted as to why this happened. But, yeah, to answer your question, I've seen a significantly um, um, people have been significantly impacted by the pandemic when it comes to their mental health, their behavioral health, their mental wellness, their ability to cope, their ability to engage in just regular normal activities. Because it's it's hard to fathom. Um, if you look back to previous pandemics or previous national emergencies, whether it's war or um, the Spanish flu, for example, the access and the connectivity that people, the connectedness people have, you I can't even imagine the um I it's you know, I think you know what I'm trying to get at. It's different from in the past than it is today, but the difference is that people have more ability to connect, have more ability to access things, and that was completely snatched away underneath them. So people's standard social skills that they didn't really develop anyway because they were too busy in a technological age, or technology has been enhancing their ability to communicate, and that was that's all they have. So it's just all over the place with where people are and how they've had difficulties dealing with um, the restrictions and challenges related to the pandemic and the fear of COVID-19 in general. I mean, social anxiety connected to the fear of getting COVID is another issue that has become crazy, because and a lot of that is driven by the media and a lot of the hysteria around COVID, but it still exists.
I have a friend that she was what we would call a social butterfly. She was into marketing. She worked at a radio station, and she was on the side a promoter. So she was very, very busy on the social front. And when this all hit, it turned her life upside down. And the reason why I like to use her as an example is because you have someone that is pretty much from one extreme, very out there, Monday night, Tuesday night, because she's part of these events as a marketing person as well as a promoter. When this hit now she's at the point this year she can't be around people. And at one point, she was working 3 jobs that heavily involved her to be around people. And to your point, she's experiencing social anxiety now. And she's at the point, I believe, that there isn't any turning back. And when I look at her, and this is someone that's been friends for years, I ask myself, and I'll ask you this too, Troy, and anyone listening, how does someone like me, who hasn't been impacted as heavily or significantly as her, how do I help her regain her former self?
You know, there's a lot of talk about new normal and um things are not ever going to be the way that they were. And when you look at brain chemistry and how the brain is affected by trauma, which this is basically one huge continuous trauma that the world is experiencing, there's truth in that. Once your brain has been changed by a traumatic experience, you're not going to regain that. That's not going to just be just that you're not going to get that back. Damage is done. What has to happen is you have to learn new ways to do the things that you used to do. Find new, what they refer to as neural pathways of the brain, to learn how to um, uh, engage and function the way that you used to. And the way that people like us can assist folks is the number one thing is understand, you know, and that's what people have a difficult time doing. And this is the same with any other trauma. I've been through what you've been through, and it didn't affect me the way it affected you. So why are you so messed up? That's what people like to say. And that is damaging to people. It's damaging to folks because it makes them feel like they are an alien, or they're not normal, or they're broken in some kind of way. And similar to those individuals who live with addiction, the last thing that you want to do to a person like that is abandon them or treat them like they're an outcast or put them like they're on the outside. They need support, because the only thing that heals things like this is, many cases when it comes to anxiety, is exposure. But they're afraid, right? They don't want to go outside and hang out in a group of people. They don't want to um, engage like they used to, because they don't know how anymore. Their nervous system has been, you know, when you talk about physical activity, right? You work out and you exercise for a long period of time, your endurance builds, your ability to engage in certain activities builds, and you're able to continue to do certain things physically for a lot of long time because you're consistently doing it. It's the same thing with these types of activities, these types of behaviors. You learn throughout your life how to socialize, and then all of a sudden it gets taken away, and now you don't know how to do it anymore. It's like you can't go back in the gym and bench press what you bench pressed if you took a year off. You have to start back at baby steps. So giving people an opportunity to relearn what they used to know, experience um, concepts and ideas that they used to know and experience before. Those are the things that we have to give people the ability to do. And what that means is giving them space to do it. Be patient with them. Don't force them to engage if they don't want to or they don't feel comfortable doing it. The hardest thing about this with people who have managed and coped with this a little better than others is that we are able to just go back out and do whatever we want, and everything is fine. And then but the other ones can't, and they feel like they're left behind, and it causes more damage, right? It causes more difficulties for them. So we have to give them that support. There's no concrete, black and white, cookie cutter way of handling that with each person. The best thing is that you can do is ask them, what can I do to help you? What can I do to assist you? Is there anything that I can do to help you manage what you're having a difficult time managing? Because we can't look at their recovery and look at their healing through our lens. We have to look at it through their lens. We have to try to understand and use that empathy and try to um, give that person an opportunity to uh, get these things back and learn these things in their own time, in their own speed. And we talk about, we talked earlier about the social network and the social connection, and that's another piece of it. Um, some of the folks that have been through this pandemic, they've been able to get online or be on Zoom or some sort of connecting method, and they're doing support groups where they created them themselves, or someone has done it for them, and they're facilitating it, and that is the method of getting back into socializing, because it's not in person. Because you have to ask her, you have to just somehow find out what the foundation of her anxiety is, the foundation of her fear is, right? Is it because she feels like she might get COVID? That's something that, is hard to get past, because that's something that you have no control over, right? You don't know. Well, you have to be honest. Well, maybe you could get COVID if you go back out. That is a possibility. Whether you're vaccinated or not, there's a possibility that you might get COVID, and you can't control that. But there are things that you can control, and that's how you communicate with a person. That's how you connect with a person. That's how you support a person. We as a society should be supporting people in general anyway, before the pandemic, but that's not what was normal. That's not what was acceptable. And so we have to do everything that we can to be the humans that we can, and the kind humans that we can be, and be as supportive as possible without trying to rush and force and provoke people into doing things that they don't want to do. And that's like I said, there's no cookie cutter answer to that. Support is important. and people will have different definitions of support. um, Support for some people is like, come on, you got to get out there. You know, when somebody has a divorce or a breakup, you got to get out there and meet somebody else. No, that's not how it works. You know, you have to give people time to heal. And she's grieving. Your friend is grieving. It's not that she's just that she's has a social anxiety, but I'm sure she loved her job. She loved what she did. Now she feels like she lost it. It's almost like losing somebody. People that have lost their careers or houses, their families, over many different things, whether it's the pandemic or politics or whatever, they've lost people. They have to have an opportunity to grieve. And I'm sure that's exactly what's happening. So she's grieving the loss of her job. So that's an added layer that you have to try to overcome, trying to support someone like her. Know the situation, know the big picture. Don't just push it. Don't just look at it from the perspective of I need to help this person get back to where they were. Find out what the obstacles are, what the barriers are, and then you address the barriers and the obstacles, and then you can get back to trying to get them to heal.
And I think that's a good point because when we, some people are going to get left behind, and that's the unfortunate part. Because as you mentioned on the top of this conversation, we can spend many hours, many days, many weeks trying to help others. And at the same time, while we're helping everyone else, we forget to help ourselves. And in regards to my friend, I look at her, and that's a support that I try to establish with her. At this point, the only person that she'll see outside of her family members is me. Because, as you mentioned, there's that trust of the support. Because it's not me saying that, come on, I can do it, you can do it, I have 5 other people. It doesn't work that way. We are each differently. The success or the experience that I may have had in the last couple of years may be different from yours, Troy. Yours would be different from your neighbors, and so on and so forth. And I like that you mentioned that we should be helping people anyways, but that wasn't how things necessarily were. I think we're getting to a point in about 2018, 2019, especially with the George Floyd incident, where you had people rallying together. There was that perception that people were getting unified and things like that. But when I look back, sometimes I feel guilty speaking of the positive things that I've experienced over the last couple of years, when there's so many people out there whose experience are negative. My experience hasn't been their experiences. We've had people been divorced. We've had people who no longer want to see their family members as a result. People have lost their job. People have lost their houses. And friendships have forever been changed. And if it's truly going to be the new normal, I think the responsibility for each of us is to define and create how that new normal is going to look like and how we're going to navigate within that new normal. And as you continue to help people, Troy, what's something that you'd want to leave with those who are maybe finding it difficult to deal with what they're dealing through, but they may not have the support system around them because they're feeling abandoned at this point?
That's a tough one. And you made some pretty important points about people's families and their friendships and their jobs, all these things that they have particularly felt ostracized from or abandoned by. And because society has been broken for so long, when it comes to people caring about other people. I mean, you look at people like us who that's just what we do. That's just who we are. The desire to help comes natural to us. But I think that recognizing, you mentioned the George Floyd situation, there are things that we should be able to recognize um, that are common, whether it's your experience or my experience or someone else's experience. Maybe on the surface, they look different because we're paying attention to those differences. But how often do we look at the commonalities that we all share and use those as um, a unifying piece of our humanity? That rallying cry of we need to help each other because no one else is going to do it. Those people who are in power or who feel like the actions of oppression that they've engaged in for so many generations is normal, they're not going to help us. So we as a community, meaning those of us who are needing to support each other because we don't have that support anywhere else, we need to take that as our soapbox, so to speak, and get on that soapbox and put ourselves in a position where we are helping each other, because we don't learn how to do things or to change based on what we're told, what we're taught, right? Those verbal words, those books that we read, that's not how you learn. You learn through what you observe, the behaviors of others, the behaviors, the things that people engage in. That's how, a nonverbal baby child who can't speak, they learn how to be a human and become and have humanity around, whether it's their parents or other people. So those people who are suffering, those people who are dealing with that feeling of abandonment, sometimes the most cathartic and healing things in the world helping others, whether it's something really small or something major like your podcast. These things, the little things matter. And so what I want to leave people with that are feeling that way is that I hate to use the phrase, it can only get better. People say it all the time, and that's a true statement. We've gotten to the point where we're so low. The only thing that we can do is get better, and supporting each other as a community is how we're going to have to do that. And those people may feel helpless or powerless to do that because they are feeling the way that they're feeling abandoned. But people need to realize that it's not what you have to offer. You have to be rich or have a podcast or a platform. You just have to have empathy. And sharing your experience with other people can actually help other people heal. It can also help us heal. We talked about this a lot in our last conversation. It's like the work that we do can be healing. And I'm not telling those people who are pathologically ill, with a major severe mental illness or something like that, where going out and trying to help people and doing things because they're internally unhealthy, is that I'm not telling those folks they need to go and do it. But those people who are dealing with grief, with depression and anxiety and some feelings of abandonment and hopelessness and things like that, I think we talked about in the previous conversation, the best healing for depression is actually getting out and doing things. And because those are restrictions, there's restrictions around it in some areas. Getting on a forum on Facebook, getting on a forum online, becoming part of a support group, having some people that you can bring into your life slowly but surely to help heal those broken pieces that you have. That's one way. But I would not be doing my profession justice if I did not say, I didn't make the recommendation that sometimes professional help is important. Sometimes professional help is needed. We don't ever want to admit or say that we want to go see a therapist or a psychologist or someone who we can talk to, but sometimes that's what's going to help. And you touched on something earlier about the health coach piece, because it doesn't have to be a licensed therapist. It doesn't have to be a psychologist. Sometimes there are mental health coaches that aren't licensed clinicians that can be just as helpful as a person who has a license, who does it has been doing it as a profession for a long period of time. So going to someone who understands what you're going through, going to someone who has empathy, going to someone who understands how to help you um, overcome those obstacles and those barriers that I talked about earlier. That sometimes is what's necessary. You can use friends, like you said, friends, family, and all that. They've kind of been torn apart. So sometimes that independent person that doesn't have any, connection to you, sometimes is the best person, because they can look at it from the outside, you know, look in and help you get past that. So um, I know that's a long description, but like I said, there isn't one way to fix it. Everybody's different. Everybody's experience is different. Everybody's recovery is going to be different.
I'm hoping we can reach a point where many of us, if not all of us, will feel empowered to do so or become powerful. You mentioned there's people who are there to help others, and I'm hoping that it can be a long-term solution where we find people who have the empowering qualities to help those along. Because for far too long, our society has kind of left behind a segment of our community where it's the people that are maybe less fortunate, the people who are suffering some type of crisis that we don't necessarily want to associate with. And because mental health had such a stigma, there was a point in time where you talked about mental health, people thought you were possessed. People thought you had demons. There was this type of conversation, but I'm hoping we've finally turned a corner where we can look at someone and say, this is my experience. I just want you to help me through my experience because I'm trying to understand it in a way that I can better cope with it, conquer it, and then share it for the next person. So when they are going through it, it's an easier path. And I'm hoping we get to the point where we can learn person to person, generation to generation. And is there anything that you would tell the next group of people that want to assist those do better in their lives?
The biggest thing I can say is just do it. And I don't mean to use the Nike slogan, but it's important that, you said that there used to be stigma, but I have to say there still is. I still have people that I have been working with that the church is still saying, pray about it. People who are in the religious community, a lot of them are not necessarily aware of a lot of the nuances of mental health, and so they're still pushing that narrative. And so those there's still those challenges. So the only way to overcome stigma is to keep talking about it. You know, uh, Mental health has been in the darkness, or as your podcast says, behind the shades, for so many years, for decades, for generations. And it's because people are afraid to talk about it, many times because they don't know how to talk about it. So educate yourselves, whether you know, take an official class on psychology or human behavior or you know mental health, or you take the time and opportunity to research it yourself and try to understand what mental health is, what it's not, um, and there are many different schools of thought about how to help people who deal with mental health challenges, and that's because there are many different needs of the different people who are dealing with mental health challenges. So you can't go into this with this cookie cutter thought of this is how I'm going to address it, this is how I'm going to do it. I mean, there are still therapists out there and psychologists out there that have one train of thought, and they think this is how you deal with it. I'm going to do CBT on this person. I'm going to do, this type of therapy on this person, and when it fails, they think it's the person that's broken. No, everybody has a different need. So, as a person who wants to help people, learn everything you can about mental health in general. And then those things that you want to know more about, say you have more experience with people who live with anxiety, study that topic. If you know people who have had a lot of trauma and they're living through challenges with PTSD and trauma related issues, study those topics. If it's depression and suicide, those types of things, study those topics. There are so many avenues out there and so many areas where you can look and learn and understand uh, um, the challenges that people have when they live with mental health diagnoses or um, behavioral health challenges, that you can learn a lot out there. And I would not say go on the internet and look at it, because not everything is true on the internet. There's some things on the internet that are written to throw you off. So if you find some reputable sources, Psychology Today is a good reputable source. Psychiatric Times is a good reputable source. Your local college is a good reputable source. If you can find a mental health or life coach training that you can take, those are good reputable sources because they discuss behavioral health and mental health issues within those courses. So do everything you can to learn about these topics before you try to help people who are experiencing these challenges, because I'm not ever going to say that you can really harm somebody if you say the wrong thing, but you would like to say the things that are real and that make sense to people when you're talking to them and trying to help them to navigate these challenges. So um, knowledge is power. It really is. And getting even the basic understanding of mental health, mental illness, um, can help you become that person that can go out and help other people, because that's what's needed. More people to understand, more people to be empathetic, more people to, hold space, even just listening to people, just sitting down and listening, because sometimes that's all they need. They need somebody to hear them. All those things are good ways of extinguishing the toxic nature of stigma and people's lack of understanding of mental health challenges. So that's how you can. Those are some ways that you can do it.